Pay close attention.
Do you actually know how much usable cash your savings will produce when you finally retire?
Most people really don't.
Right. Like if you have, say, $200,000 saved up right now, you might look at that balance and feel pretty secure. I mean, it's a big number.
It feels like a lot of money.
It does. But the brutal math of traditional retirement planning says that a $200,000 balance might only safely generate about $8,000 a year for you to actually live on.
Which is just a terrifying reality check.
Yeah, think about that for a second. $8,000 a year. That's not a retirement. That's an emergency.
Exactly.
So, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are tearing apart the standard retirement recipe to figure out why your money might be structurally suffocated.
And how shifting to what we call a two-engine strategy could fundamentally change the math of your entire future.
Right, because it is such a critical reality check. And it's the exact reason why accumulation, like just piling up a big lump sum, is a totally different mathematical universe than distribution.
Right, which is actually creating a sustainable income stream that you can live on. Most people they have no idea what their lump sum translates to in monthly cash.
I certainly didn't before digging into the strategy briefs we're looking at today. And I think for a lot of you listening, especially the avid learners out there who are generally responsible.
You probably just assume that if you keep putting a percentage of your paycheck away into a standard retirement account, you'll just inherently be fine.
Exactly. You just kind of trust the system.
And that assumption right there is exactly where the systemic problem starts. The idea that saving money is the same thing as engineering an income stream is, it's really the biggest misconception in personal finance today.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because assuming you'll be fine just by tossing money into a single account is, well, it's like assuming you'll bake a perfect cake just by throwing flour in an oven without a recipe and just, hoping for the best.
Right. You might have the ingredients, you might have the heat, but without the correct architecture, the right recipe, you aren't getting the result you want.
It's just going to be a mess.
It is. So to understand how to improve the recipe, we first have to look at what most people are doing by default. Like, what is the standard financial architecture everyone is told to use?
Right now, the vast majority of people use what we can basically call a single bucket strategy. They put their money into one single account, usually a traditional Roth IRA or maybe a 401k, and they just leave it there.
Exactly. You put your money into this single bucket and you'll let it ride the market. Historically, you might expect that to grow at an average rate over time.
Right, like maybe 4 to 6% or something.
Yeah. And during your working years, on the surface, that looks totally fine. The balance goes up. But the issue is that when it comes time to actually use that money, you cannot just reach in and take whatever you need.
Wait, why not? I mean, if it's my money and I've grown it to this massive pile, why can't I just take out like 50 grand a year to live my life?
Because of a major structural limitation. This single bucket is essentially being asked to do way too many jobs at once.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it has to grow your wealth, it has to protect your wealth from market crashes, and it has to produce a reliable, lifelong income stream. Doing all three of those things perfectly in one place is, well, it's mathematically impossible.
Right, because growth requires risk and protection requires avoiding risk. You can't do both at the exact same time.
Precisely. If you are taking money out of a single bucket to pay your grocery bill during a year when the stock market is down, say, 20%, you are permanently destroying the underlying principle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's called sequence of returns risk. And because of that specific danger, the financial industry had to basically invent a safety measure. If you blend growth, protection, and income into one bucket, you have to establish a hard limit so you don't drain the bucket dry in a down market.
And that safety measure is the famous 4% rule, right?
Right. The 4% rule is it's a mathematical cage designed purely so you do not run out of money before you run out of life.
That sounds grim.
It is. The rule dictates that to be safe, you should really only withdraw about 4% of your total portfolio value per year in retirement.
Okay, so let's run the actual math on that because this was the massive wake-up call for me when I was looking at the sources.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's say you have that traditional Roth IRA, and over the years you do a great job, and it grows to $200,000. According to the safety limits of the 4% rule, you can only withdraw about $8,000 a year.
Maybe $10,000 if you really push it and get lucky.
Wait, $8,000 a year? If I've spent decades saving $200,000, that feels like a massive letdown. How is anyone supposed to live on that?
What's fascinating here is how our brains trick us when we look at large numbers. $200,000 feels like true wealth when it's just sitting there in a lump sum.
Yeah, it looks great on a screen.
But when you apply the mathematical reality of safe withdrawal rates to that lump sum, the illusion completely shatters.
I mean, if 8,000 is all you get, you're not just disappointed, you're looking at a massive gap between what you have and what you actually need to survive.
Exactly. It's a huge shortfall.
So let's talk about where that gap comes from, because this is a major concept in the analysis. If your single bucket is only yielding that tiny fraction, what is actually happening to your lifestyle?
Well, the standard one bucket strategy usually only generates enough to cover about 60 to 65% of a person's required income in retirement.
Wow.
Think about what it takes to run your life right now. Now imagine permanently operating with only 65% of the money needed to cover it.
And the rest of the money is it's just missing, like it's not coming.
It's just not there.
And we all know that inflation, taxes, market volatility, and healthcare costs are constantly driving up the baseline of what we need. I don't think we need to belabor the point that life gets more expensive.
No, definitely not.
But the core issue here isn't just that things cost more. It's that you are structurally short on the other side. It's like trying to cross a 100-foot chasm with a 60-foot bridge.
That's a great analogy.
And to make it worse, inflation and taxes are actively chipping away at the bridge you do have.
Exactly. I want you, the listener, to stop and really think about that for a second.
Boo!
Consider your life right now. How would you handle a sudden 35 to 40% drop in your current lifestyle?
That's brutal.
What specifically would you have to cut? Because that income gap isn't a mistake or some stroke of bad luck. It is built into the standard one-bucket system.
It is a terrifying thought. But thankfully, the analysis we're diving into today doesn't just leave us staring into the abyss.
No, it doesn't.
Because simply trying to, save more into a broken system won't fix the underlying math problem. If the bucket is fundamentally limited, we have to look at how we optimize the architecture of the money itself.
Optimization is the absolute key here.
Phew.
We are shifting from a conversation about merely accumulating money to a conversation about engineering it.
And this is where we introduce the solution from the sources, turning that single bucket into two coordinated engines. The two-engine strategy.
Right.
Now, we need to be really clear on the terms here because the financial industry loves their acronyms.
Oh, they absolutely do.
Sure.
Let's break down exactly what these engines are. Engine 1 is what is often called an FIA. That stands for Fixed Index Annuity.
Okay,
In this strategy, it's used as a protected growth engine.
let's define that. How exactly does an FIA protect from losses while still growing? Because normally if you're in the market, you just take the hits with the gains. That's just how it works.
Great question. An FIA is essentially a contract with an insurance company. Your money isn't actually invested directly in the stock market.
It's not.
No. Instead, the company uses a portion of the interest it earns to buy options that track a market index, like the S&P 500.
So it's shadowing the market, not actually sitting directly in it.
Exactly. And because of how those options are structured, if the market index goes up, you get credited a portion of that gain, usually up to a certain cap. But if the market index crashes, your return for that year is simply zero.
Wait, zero?
Yeah, you don't lose a single dime of your principal due to market losses.
Yeah.
Zero is your hero.
Got it. So engine 1, the FIA, is an engine that ratchets up when things are good, but basically locks in place when things go bad. It protects the principal.
Precisely.
So what about engine 2?
Engine 2 is an IUL. That stands for Indexed Universal Life Insurance. And I know where you're thinking.
Wait. Life insurance. We are talking about engineering a retirement income stream. Why on earth are we suddenly talking about life insurance? I don't want to die to get my retirement money.
I hear that all the time.
Uh-huh.
But we aren't using the IUL just for the death benefit. We're using it for the tax code advantages surrounding its cash value.
Okay, color me intrigued.
An IUL is a permanent life insurance policy that builds a cash value over time, and that is also tied to market indexes. But here is the critical part. When you want to use that money in retirement, you don't technically withdraw it.
Because withdrawing it would trigger taxes.
Exactly. Instead, you take a policy loan against your own death benefit.
Oh, wow. And because it's a loan, the IRS doesn't tax it as income.
Exactly. You are engineering a completely tax-free income stream.
Okay, if we connect this to the bigger picture, The limitation of the single bucket was that it had to do everything, right? Grow the money, protect it from crashes, and spit out an income.
Right, all at once.
But by separating this into two engines, the money is mathematically separated by duty. You have engine one dedicated purely to protected growth, and engine two dedicated purely to generating a tax-advantaged income stream. They aren't fighting against each other anymore.
You've isolated the jobs. And because the jobs are isolated, neither engine is bound by the restrictive 4% rule of the single bucket.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because just having two separate accounts sitting next to each other isn't what creates the massive advantage. It's how these two engines talk to each other.
Right.
And that brings us to the core mechanism of this whole strategy, which the sources call the strategic rollout. This is the actual secret sauce, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
The two-engine strategy only outperforms the single bucket because of the coordination between them.
So how does that work?
The mechanics of the strategic rollout work like this. You let engine one, the FIA, do its job and generate a yield. Then each year, you take a portion of that growth and you deliberately sweep it over to engine two, the IUL, to pay the premium and fund that cash value.
Okay, I really want to emphasize a mindset shift here from the text. You are not spending the growth from engine one. You are redeploying it.
Exactly.
You aren't taking the gains and like buying a boat. You are systematically moving the excess yield from a bucket designed to accumulate wealth into a bucket designed to distribute the wealth tax-free.
Think of it like a water wheel sitting in a river. The river is the market, spinning engine one to generate power. We don't dismantle the water wheel to get energy.
Right.
We just siphon off the electricity it generates to charge a massive backup battery. And that battery is engine two. And then later in life, we can tap into that battery completely tax-free whenever we want.
Okay, hold on. I have to push back here and demand the math on behalf of the listener because this sounds like a perpetual motion machine, and those, don't exist.
Fair enough.
You just said we siphon off the electricity. If I take the growth from engine one every single year to pay the IUL premium, doesn't engine one eventually stall out? Aren't you completely killing the compound interest on engine one by constantly skimming the top?
That is the exact right question to ask. But you aren't killing the compound interest. You are relocating it to an incredibly efficient environment.
How so?
Remember, you are leaving the entire principal untouched in engine one.
Yeah.
If you have $100,000 in engine one and it earns 7%, you leave the $100,000 there to earn again next year.
Oh, I see.
And you only move the $7,000 of yield over to engine two.
So the original base is still fully intact and completely protected from losses.
Yes. And meanwhile, that $7,000 you moved into engine two enters a highly leveraged, tax-advantaged compounding environment of its own inside the life insurance policy.
That's brilliant.
You are funding the second engine with house money, the gains from the first engine, rather than your own out-of-pocket cash.
Wow. So because neither engine is suffering from market losses, because zero is your hero in both accounts, and because you aren't paying taxes on the distributions from the IUL, you are mathematically crushing the single bucket strategy.
Precisely. Let's look at the ultimate outcome of this optimization. We talked earlier about the traditional single bucket.
Right.
Over a lifetime of saving, if it grows to $200,000, tax drag, and the 4% rule mean it safely yields maybe $8,000 a year.
Right. The miserable $8,000 emergency fund we remember.
But when someone uses their working years to utilize the optimized two-engine strategy, deploying the strategic rollout, they bypass the tax drag and the market loss drag.
And what does that look like in numbers?
Over that same time frame, a person could potentially build a combined system value of over $1 million. And because they aren't bound by the 4% rule, that system could yield $20,000 to $35,000 a year in tax-free income.
Wait, I want to be crystal clear. You're saying that simply by changing the architecture, by legally separating the money into a protected growth engine and a tax-free distribution engine, someone goes from an $8,000 lifestyle to a $35,000 lifestyle.
Exactly.
Using the exact same initial saving habits.
Yes, because the structure itself creates the advantage. When you eliminate market losses, you eliminate sequence of returns risk. When you eliminate sequence of returns risk, you no longer have to restrict yourself to a tiny 4% withdrawal rate. And when you utilize policy loans, you eliminate the tax burden on your income. You are simply removing the frictions that absolutely strangle the single bucket.
That is incredible. It fundamentally shifts how you view retirement. But, and this is a big but, we need a reality check here.
We do.
The sources make this very clear. A system that produces over $1 million and radically changes your income stream requires actual maintenance. This is not some magic set it and forget it money machine.
No, it is not. And any financial professional who tells you otherwise is selling snake oil. The performance of these engines is based on market indexes. They aren't fixed guarantees.
So it fluctuates.
Right. Some years, engine one will have a great yield to sweep over. Some years, the market will be flat, your return will be zero, and there will be no excess yield to move at all.
Which means the strategy requires active management.
Absolutely. This requires flexibility. You have to sit down and review the strategy every single year. You have to look at how engine one performed, look at the economic environment, and adjust the strategic rollout. Basically, adjusting the throttle when appropriate to improve your long-term outcomes.
It's like flying a plane. You have your two engines, and they are incredibly powerful, but you still need a pilot in the cockpit checking the dials and adjusting the fuel mix based on the wind and weather. You can't just fall asleep at the yoke for 30 years.
Which tells us exactly who this strategy is actually for. It fits people who want to be proactive, people who are willing to think long-term.
And most importantly, people who actively want to optimize their money rather than just passively participating in whatever default system their employer handed them.
This raises an important question for you, the listener, because based on the framework we just walked through, you essentially have three choices in front of you.
Yeah, let's break those choices down.
All right. Choice number one, you can do nothing. You can stay in the single bucket strategy, accept the 4% rule, cross your fingers, and just hope the income gap doesn't hit your lifestyle too hard when you retire.
Choice number two, you can try to brute force it. You can make small changes, try to save a drastically larger percentage of your paycheck into that same broken single bucket just to compensate for the fact that the architecture is inefficient.
Or choice number three, you can actually optimize your strategy. You can look into setting up coordinated engines, separating the jobs your money has to do, and taking mathematical control of how your wealth functions.
So what does this all mean? Let's quickly recap the journey we just went on today. We started by looking at the standard default recipe most people use, the single bucket Roth IRA or 401k.
Right.
We saw how blending growth, protection, and income into one account forces you to rely on the 4% rule, which severely limits your actual usable cash.
We then identify the income gap, realizing that the standard approach often falls massively short of what you actually need to survive. Meanwhile, taxes and market losses actively erode whatever is left.
From there, we introduced the solution from the source material, moving from one constrained bucket to two coordinated engines. We defined the protected growth of the fixed index annuity and the tax-free distribution power of the indexed universal life policy.
And we broke down the mechanism, the strategic rollout. We explained how siphoning the excess yield from the FIA to fund the IUL allows you to build growth and income simultaneously, all without exposing your principal to market crashes.
Right, and removing those frictions, market loss, and taxes allows you to safely generate significantly more usable income than a traditional single bucket ever could. Provided, of course, that you're willing to be a proactive pilot and manage the engines year after year.
Because again, the advantage comes from the structure itself.
Exactly. So here is your actionable takeaway for today. Look at your primary retirement account right now and ask yourself, is this money doing one clear job or is it trying to do three?
That's a great test.
If your single account is trying to grow, stay safe from market crashes, and eventually pay you an income all at once, you might be trapped in a single bucket. And if you want to explore this, review it with a spouse, talk to a professional, get started. But if it's not a fit right now, that's completely okay too.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We spend so much of our lives agonizing over what the stock market is doing on any given day.
Oh, constantly.
We panic over the news, over recessions, over the ticker symbols crawling across the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
But what if the biggest risk to your financial future isn't the stock market at all? What if the biggest risk is the actual structure of the accounts you're keeping your money in?
That is a phenomenal question. It brings us right back to the beginning. You can have all the finest ingredients in the world, and you can turn the oven up as hot as it goes, but if you refuse to use the right recipe, you're never going to get a cake you actually want to eat. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.